All right. Thank you for being here today for the Thursday, July 11th Business Operations and Finance Committee meeting. It is 10:01 a.m. We'll call the meeting to order. Ms. Shope, can I have a roll call?
Yes. Greg Schneider.
Present.
Brian Nichols.
Here.
And Brian Anderson.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Item 1C, approval of the agenda. Anybody have any comments or questions? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. That passes. We've got approval of minutes on here, but there weren't any attached minutes. So I'm not sure what minutes we're looking to approve, unless that would be from our July, what would that be? That'd be the July 2nd meeting? Are they there?
That's a good question. I've got it. You do have it?
Okay. Okay. They just didn't. Okay. Well, as we were all there, any comments, revisions, changes you'd like to see on the minutes? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Get a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? That passes. All right, we'll move on to our only discussion/action item today, 2A, ad hoc. It's listed as Ad Hoc Financial Transparency Committee. So I'll start here. I think the goal here is to find a method to, again, try to be transparent with information, not for a singular purpose, but I think just for it'll benefit in that transparency section, whether it's for, we've got a budget that's upcoming, right? That's kind of the hot topic right now, right? And there's always going to be a hot topic, but then there's also, hey, are we going to do a referendum or not? So there's going to be discussion that I think in information flow that this committee could help us sort through, and then the makeup of the committee. So our policy states that this committee can create an ad hoc committee and appoint members, but both the committee itself and the appointed members also need to be approved by the full board. So just wanted to get that discussion today to see if we can determine the name for the committee, who we'd like to invite to the committee, and make those recommendations to the full board so they could approve that on Tuesday's agenda. Would be my goal under this topic. Any questions on it on this so far?
No, I don't really have any questions. I do have a suggestion as far as the name, and we can discuss this, of course. But I think it should just be the Ad Hoc Financial Committee. I think transparency is a foregone conclusion. It's part of the process. So I don't know that we need that in there. Just Ad Hoc Financial Committee would be my suggestion, and that's certainly open to discussion.
I think we need to keep the transparency as the name, because that is the function of the committee. It is not an advisory committee. It is not. Its purpose and function is to open up avenues of transparency for what the budget is and the finances are. So I think we need to keep that word transparency in there, which keeps it focused on this is what the purpose of this committee is.
Okay. And we do have Board President T. Johnson here with us as well. Not on the committee, but certainly welcome. Any thoughts you have as well?
Well, looking at our policy on ad hoc committees, I'm reading from Policy 186. 4 basic principles shall be followed with ad hoc advisory committees. 1, advisory committees should be appointed only when there is a definite function to be performed. So, first, what is our definite function? And it is going to be an advisory committee because that's what we...
Okay, we are now in violation of open meeting law.
How so?
Because the purpose as stated in the thing is to, let me go back to my notes there specifically. It says the purpose is continue considerations around efforts to improve transparency regarding how the district utilizes the financial resources available. It is not an advisory committee. Its purpose as stated does not state that it will direct or give advice to the district on the financial resources. It is solely on ways to improve transparency of what the district is currently doing.
Well, Greg, take a moment and read this policy.
I understand.
Ad hoc committees are finite advisory committees.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. It's Policy 186.
Right. I've read it.
Okay. So
I've read it.
The purpose of ad hoc committees is advisory.
Mm-hmm. Right. In which case, the committee that you're suggesting is not possible under the policies that we have. This is not an advisory committee. That is not the purpose that has been stated. To provide advisory on how the district will work its budget.
Well, and that's, I think, what Chairman Anderson is asking is this the right title? Is this the right purpose that has been laid out?
Right.
And is that not what your intention for today's discussion was?
Yeah, so my goal here of the discussion is what does this committee look like? So this is absolutely part of the discussion. And then once we have the committee, the members of that committee will decide the function or, what they want it to look like. I think our purpose here is to define the committee. Do we want to have the committee establish it? Who's going to be on the committee? And then that committee does that work, not this committee. So...
No, the board gives directives to any ad hoc committee. It serves at our purpose. We establish the goal and the purpose of the committee. The committee cannot stray from that and take on any other responsibility that is not given to it by the board. So the advisory committee or the transparency committee cannot, once they meet, decide, okay, we're going to go a different direction. It is a specific purpose, and as stated here, it's to improve transparency. That's the sole purpose of the committee, as stated. If it's anything other than that, you are in violation of open meeting laws because you have not stated clearly the intent of this meeting.
So, going on in Policy 186, Rule 1, Standing Board Committee Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. The standing board committees, which your committee is, can develop ad hoc committees.
Right.
They ultimately get approved by the board, but you develop it and bring it to the board for approval.
Board Member Schneider, advisory is in the title of the policy twice. It's the advisory committee. The other thing that I would recommend, which is the word recommendations, is all over this policy. These are recommendations coming to the board from the ad hoc committee to the finance committee and ultimately to the board of education, which is all of us plus the other members of the committee. So, to me, it's either the ad hoc financial advisory committee or ad hoc Ad Hoc Financial Recommendation Committee, because that's what, if you look in here, it's all written recommendations, recommendations, recommendations. The board shall dismiss the ad hoc committee after hearing final recommendations. It doesn't say final transparency, it says final recommendations.
Right, but the purpose of the committee is to improve transparency, period. That's it. That's what's stated in the purpose. That's what's been discussed in discussions beforehand. That is the purpose of this meeting, is to consider a ad hoc committee to improve transparency. If you stray outside of that, you have strayed outside the bounds of open meeting laws because you have not represented the meeting correctly. If you're looking for a committee that would give advice or to advise the district on how money is to be spent, that is a totally different committee than what you have indicated and have discussed. If you want that kind of a committee, you need to post it as such, so that those who want to speak for or against that have that opportunity to do that, and so that we are clear with the public as to the purpose of the meeting.
Board Member Schneider, let me ask, I'm just, obviously, nobody here wants to be in violation of open meeting law, so
Correct.
I think you've put some thought into it. So if the goal of any hypothetical ad hoc committee, it will result in a recommendation of some kind.
Right, to improve transparency of the budget.
So is there any kind of ad hoc committee that is not an advisory committee?
No, because you wouldn't establish a committee. It's what is the purpose of the committee, and it's specifically stated here to improve transparency. It is not about making recommendations on the budget. It is only established to find ways to be more transparent with the community and with all of the stakeholders as to what the budget looks like and how the money is being used. It cannot advise on how to use that money, because that's a different purpose than what's stated. So it depends on what your purpose for the committee is. I mean, what was stated and what was discussed in board meetings was to make sure that the budget and how money is spent is more transparent to the community. And so the advice that the committee may have is ways that we can improve that transparency and make sure the community and the stakeholders understand the budget, how money is being spent, and why. But it's transparency to the community. So the advice comes back to this committee and ultimately from here to the board on how to be transparent.
So I think we can have this discussion in our committee today and not be in violation, because we can have a discussion. What you're saying is we cannot take action and recommend an advisory committee because we didn't
if it is other than
notice the meeting.
Improving transparency. You cannot approve anything if it has anything to do with anything other than improving transparency to the stakeholders.
Okay. Mr. Nichols.
Then I have a question. So, based on what this committee and this board has been through for the last year and a half that I've been on, almost year and a half, the question is, how can we be more transparent than what we already are? I mean, I honestly don't know that. We are being transparent. Mr. Chady presents the data every month. We approve it or disapprove it. We move it to the full board and it's approved. That's transparency.
Right.
Okay. So, but now we need an advisory committee to make recommendations to improve the finances.
To improve transparency of the finances.
There is nowhere to improve. I'm sorry.
Then there is no purpose for the ad hoc committee. as stated in this meeting notice, and as discussed at board meetings. The purpose of the committee is to improve transparency. And I think there are ways that we can improve transparency. I think the community could look at different portions of the budget and understand why they're spent in this way. For example, the amount of money that comes into the district that the district then has to send out of our budget to pay for open enrollment, for vouchers, for the private charter school, and so on. I mean, that's not clear to the public. So the committee can come up with ways to break down the budget and to look at it and to report it to the community in a different way to make it easier for the community to understand. Mr. Cheney does a perfect job with what they're presenting to us for our understanding. That doesn't mean that the community is going to understand that as it's presented. But that's not Mr. Cheney's fault, because he's presenting to us, the board. And so he's giving it to us as the board needs it. Maybe there's a way that we can improve that transparency to state this is why these things are spent in this way. This is how the budget is used, to improve that transparency piece in a way that they can understand.
Okay, so I see what you're saying, and I think, and we can talk about, again, as a committee, what we're hoping to accomplish. I would hope to accomplish more than educating the community. It's about receiving feedback and right. So that's, and if that's not what we've posted here, in an effort not to, to follow open meetings law, because we certainly want to. What does the committee think about, we could repost the meeting for tomorrow and post it in a way that's going to deliver whatever it is we decide we are looking for. But we can still have that discussion today and say, what do we want this to be? And we can repost that and do it appropriately so that anyone from the public can certainly weigh in on that. Does that sound like because what I'm hearing is we may not be able to take the action I thought we were going to be able to take tonight based on how it's posted. So I can get on board with that. I don't want to be in violation of that.
Right.
So I guess then I would turn the discussion to what do we want this committee's function to be specifically? Like Tia had pointed out, number one is what is its specific function, and we can post it appropriately and move forward if that's what we decide to do.
Yet the charge of the board during discussions at board level were to improve transparency. That is what the board consensus was, is to create an ad hoc committee for that purpose. So that is the purpose that has been given to this committee, is to create an ad hoc committee to improve transparency. If you are doing other than that, it needs to go back to the full board to get a different charge from the board as to the purpose of this committee.
Well, the committee can be the starting point for the ad hoc committee because the full board gets a chance to approve it or not. But
the board gave its charge to this committee as to the purpose of this committee. So that was the direction by the board during discussion, was that it would be a committee to improve transparency. That is the direction that the full board gave this committee to create. That is the charge it is to follow. If you are doing anything other than that, then you are not doing the will of the board. And so now you have a committee that is doing its own thing, irregardless of the directions it was given by the board. So if it's not to improve transparency, it needs to go back to the full board before anything is done at this committee. Because the charge the board gave is to create an ad hoc for transparency. That is the purpose of this meeting at this point. That is what the charge of the board is. That is what has been posted. Changing the posting to be something else is still not following the will of the board.
So is it your opinion, if we have the discussion and say, what do we want it to look like, and we don't take any action because we decide we don't want to Transparency Committee. We can choose not to take action on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be your thought that this would be brought up at the full board meeting.
It would have to be a discussion at the full board meeting.
To have the discretion to allow this committee to have the next conversation, to then in turn recommend it to the full board.
It would have to go to the full board to get a different directive from the full board as for the purpose of the committee, of the ad hoc committee. The board gave this committee its desire and its wishes and charged you with creating an ad hoc committee to improve transparency. That is the directive of the board. The committee cannot overrule the full board. So since that's the directive that was issued, that's the directive that you have.
Tia?
So it looks like there are two different thoughts here. The thought of a transparency ad hoc committee and the thought of we need to figure out this budget ASAP committee. And I hear what Board Member Schneider is saying, and he's not wrong. I don't know that that was necessarily the intent of the board, for it to be transparency and educational to the public, although those are good things. But what you could do now is say, okay, you know what, the will of the board, the full board wanted that, we'll have that ad hoc committee, but you also have the right then to say, okay, let's talk about having another ad hoc committee let's save this budget before it's too late. If you want to repost and do something tomorrow before 5 when I need to get the Tuesday agenda up, have at it. I mean, you're the chairperson, you do what you feel you need to do, but it does not need to come to the full board first. A standing board ad hoc committee can have, or a standing board committee can have and develop its own ad hoc committee. It's right here in policy.
So I think, I guess to fulfill our obligation from what the full board direction gave us, then we could recommend not to have an ad hoc financial transparency committee, right? That would be an action we could take, and that would kill that unless the board wanted to take other action, right? And then, like you said, Tia, I feel that the standing finance operations and finance committee has the authority to initiate an ad hoc committee, advisory committee, and we would just need to post that. And it's redundant to have, we'll conclude the business, that direction that the full board gave us, and then we can address what we want that ad hoc committee to look like, and seek approval from the full board, after we've had that discussion appropriately. So before we take action on item 2A, we would, there's no reason not to take any action. If anyone is looking to make a motion on item 2A, we could satisfy that and move forward.
I move that we, help me out with language, I move that we cancel the ad hoc financial transparency committee. Period.
Yeah. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second that motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, anybody in favor of canceling the ad hoc committee as presented on item 2A signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Nay.
Nay. That motion carries. Our next meeting date, as posted right now, I think is still set for, I believe, the August 6th, unless otherwise posted. And we'll move on to item 3B, adjournment. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. And opposed? That carries. We are adjourned.